What's up, everybody? This is Rob Shack. Hope y'all having a good day. In the background, I'm going to have some Gran Turismo 3 Epic Race stuff going on here. This is my Like the Wind race where I'm using the Toyota GT1 road car, TS020. And on the verge of Gran Turismo 7 coming out, I wanted to kind of give a just ranking system of all the Gran Turismo games, in my opinion. This is just my opinion, so you can leave in the comments what your ranking is of main games. I'm only going to do the main games because obviously you have like Sport and PSP and Vita and all those things, and those are all kind of in the prologues, the HDs and concepts and all that stuff. Like those are all fun, but those don't really count in my opinion. Well, they kind of count. I mean, I'll give them shout outs, I guess, whatever. But yeah, I'm just gonna kind of go through. This is just kind of off the cuff. I have just like a couple notes here of things that I wanted to say, but it's just like I wanted to kind of go through and rank the Gran Turismo games from worst to best, and then kind of throw where I think Gran Turismo 7 could end up. So yeah, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and share. Help me get to 1,000 subs. We're hoping to get there soon. I'm not sure if I'm gonna get Gran Turismo 7. I think I might at some point. I'm not sure, but yeah. So yeah, I'll just go through and just kind of give my notes on all this stuff, and I would love to hear in the comments again. Comment below what you would put where. Where would you rank all the Gran Turismo games? You can do it in any way you want. Just let me know so that I don't... Because obviously if you're going from worst to best or best to worst, that's good to differentiate. So just let me know in the comments how you would rank all the main Gran Turismo games. Because I'm curious. So I'm just going to go through them and not like do anything flashy. Alright, so number 5, I think Gran Turismo 5 is the worst by far. I think Gran Turismo 5 is... completely garbage. I feel bad saying that because there are some people who really like Gran Turismo 5, and I'm not hating on you for liking Gran Turismo 5, but I played that game, and I was absolutely frustrated by everything about the game. I mean, I like that they added the PP system, because I think that's just kind of a nice way to balance certain races, so you don't play with a car that just overpowers everything, but they literally had premium and standard cars in GT5, and I thought that was really stupid, and they had the like gall to name them each by premium and standard, so like people would be like, well, okay, I want a standard car, so that means it's gonna suck. It's just gonna be a PS2 version of a car with no interior in GT5 for standard cars, by the way. And then they had premium cars which looked beautiful and they were amazing, and you got the interior view and it was awesome and it was great. So you had this huge drastic difference between the two versions of cars, and they really didn't update the PS2 cars very much. Like, it was pretty noticeable that they literally just looked like the exact same car but just slightly updated because the natural graphics of the PS3 were more than the PS2. I thought that was so crazy that they did that. That's like one of the biggest things I hated about GT5. Oh, actually, sorry. The biggest thing I hated about GT5 was the B-Spec mode actually having like races and prize cars. I thought that was really stupid too, because I was in college when that game came out, and like you would do the B-Spec mode, and if your driver got stressed, he would just spin out, crash into things, and mess up. And so you basically would have to, in the same way that in Gran Turismo 4 you use B-Spec mode, you would just put a very powerful car and then let the B-Spec mode win by a lot, because if your car was fast enough, the AI could actually do something. In GT5, that like wasn't a thing. The cars like it was so hard for the driver to make a pass, so then you just end up being screwed, and then you would lose because there was so many more cars, which was awesome. Gran Turismo 5 had more cars, and it wasn't just the standard 6. But on B-Spec mode, that's like impossible. Like B-Spec races with more than 6 cars is like impossible. I don't know how people got through that without pulling all their hair out and smashing their TV against the wall. Like how, like it was so infuriating. Even when you use a car that was faster than other cars, it was just too many. There was too many AI in the race. Like it was one of the downsides to having, and that's why they kind of got rid of B-Spec mode at 6, because they were like, we can't have prize cars linked to B-Spec mode. I don't know why they thought that was a good idea. At least they learned. But that was just completely crazy. Some good things about GT5 was I did have WRC and NASCAR. Even though Jeff Gordon looks completely horrendous in that game, the people look terrible. But it was cool that they had like those like special, whatever you call those things, like the special like licenses to cool stuff. That was awesome, and that was the first time they ever did that. Also, they finally added Ferraris and Lambos and like supercars like that, so that was sick. It took them they technically added it in 5 Prologue, but I'm giving that credit to 5 because I needed to give them something. They at least had supercars in the game, and that was really sick. I thought that was like something that had to be mentioned as well. I feel bad for hating on 5 so strongly, but it's just like adding the PP system was cool. Thought that was great, but it was so infuriating to see that they actually labeled the downscaled graphics cards. Like, why would you notably let people know that you put less effort into like 80% of the cars in the game? Like, why would you do like that? Was such a bad idea. It was such a terrible idea. Having NASCARs in the game was cool. Having World Rally was in the game was cool. GT5 is probably the last game that really focused on rally, so like that is something that they have going for them as well. They have like all those they have a lot of good cars, a lot of great rally cars in the game too. They really upped their game with rally. I thought that was really good too. So I want to give them some credit there. Beast Spec mode was literally the worst thing ever. It was absolute garbage. Couldn't stand it. And the fact that they had prize cars linked to that was so stupid. And that your driver had to like level up in terms of stamina was stupid, because if they were a new driver, which is literally the beginning of the game, they're a new driver and they would like run into walls. I remember like getting so frustrated and being like, why does my driver get stressed every 2 seconds? Oh, because he's level 1. Okay, I have to make him higher than level 1, but he's so stupid and crashes, I never will level him up. So I think that's it with 5. That's it with 5. Next up on the list, I think I would put 6. Gran Turismo 6, I think, is the next worst, and this is a huge jump up from 5, so I'm not saying Gran Turismo 6 is a bad game. Obviously, I play it on my channel a lot. Check out my playlist on that. GT6 is way better. They still have NASCAR in the game. They still had that license. They didn't have the rally anymore, and I noticed that in GT6 there's really not a lot of rally events. 5 was kind of the last game that like was the last pinnacle, was probably the pinnacle of rally. So to people who love rally, I'm sure that they really didn't like 6 because they basically didn't care about it anymore. They also had that moon, the lunar exploration was awesome in GT6. I mean, it was like so wacky and zany. It's like the equivalent of having that like Daimler motor carriage in GT4, like these weird like crazy ideas. And they also had the Goodwood Festival of Speed. That thing was awesome. You get a lot of prize cars that way. The way that GT6 was lined up, where you get the license at the end, that was really cool. Like you would go to the B mode, and then the license tests were what got you from B to A. That was something that they never did before or since. That was a really cool idea, actually. And then yeah, you'd win a car for doing that stuff well, and I thought that was really interesting. And that was actually something I didn't put in my notes. So that was kind of a little random thing. Was I loved the menus of GT6. Let's see. They had way more content. That's nothing that's bad about GT5 was there wasn't a lot of content. I'll go back to GT5 for a second. They didn't have a lot of content for the simulation mode because they were banking on internet or the online play, which was a bad idea as well, because people play Gran Turismo for the car collection and for the replayability of fighting AI. And that was removed basically by how little was in 5. And then with 6, they added a lot more races back. So 6 had a lot of good content in terms of a lot of AI races, which is like literally why people play the game in the first place. So I thought that was really good that they brought back a lot of good stuff. The B area has like 3 races, but then all the rest of them have like 10, 12, 15 races. So you have a lot of good content in each of the license test areas. And then you do a test to get out of it. Like, it kind of restricts the player in a way, but in a good way. Like, it shows that they were really thinking about how to make it as the user interface as friendly as possible. They did a good job. So it was a big risk having the license tests be linked to certain races and the stars and stuff, but that actually worked well because 1, the license tests weren't impossible, and 2, like, it was a way to graduate from getting through something. I thought that was actually really awesome. Again, a lot of hand-holding in GT6, which is kind of the problem with 6. There is a lot of hand-holding. They force you to buy a Honda Fit at the beginning, and they force you to do your license tests at the time you do them instead of just doing them all at once. But again, they did a good job with it. It actually was done very well. It was probably done the best it ever could have been. Like, I wouldn't recommend them do that again, but they did it fantastically. I think that's why, because I feel like they could do it again and it would be worse, and I would be like, y'all should never do this again. At least now everyone's like, yeah, that wasn't great, but that's cool that you did that. Sure, we'll give you a pass on the like forcing hand holding. In 6 they improved a lot of the graphics for the cars that were standard. They actually, you can see a difference between cars between 5 and 6. They actually look better. They are still downscale, and they don't have detailed interiors, but they do have an interior view now, finally. So like that type of stuff is really good. They clearly were just like, they made 6 to kind of redeem everything from 5 that everyone hated, because people just hated so much stuff about the way they did 5. So I think 6 was really, really important too. This is like not really a thing about the game itself, but about what it led to. If 6 hadn't have happened, Sport would have bombed. Because 5 was so bad, 6 was the game that kind of took the heat from what 5 did wrong. So then Sport was fine. People like, when everyone bought Sport, and Sport is well received and well liked, 6 is well received too, but not a lot of people bought it. So 6 was really important to kind of redeem the franchise. Making a game for the PS3 right before the PS4 comes out was a great idea, because they had been working on Sport. So then they were like, well, we'll make Sport now too. We'll kind of do a quick 1-2 punch of like 2 different games within a reasonable amount of time for Polyphony. And then we'll make Sport was sold well, was well received, had a long player base, and they were able to make a lot of cars for 7 through that. So I'm like, 6 was very, very important game, which is why I'm ranking it below the other games, but only because it still is a great game. I just think the other games are slightly better, but 6's importance in the whole franchise has to be mentioned and has to be talked about, because if 6 hadn't have happened, I think that Sport would have been the game that didn't sell well like 6. Like, Sport would be the game that has the lowest sales, and everyone comments about how it's bad, and people don't realize that when a game like 6 or Sport would have sold, if that had sold bad, it was because of 5, not because of 6. It's because everyone got burnt out on 5. It's because everyone tried to play 5, and that was where the problem. So 6 was not a bad game. It just it was the scapegoat of 5's mistakes that led to Sport being good, which now makes 7 like a dream that can actually happen. Like, instead of just being like, oh, I'm sure they'll do 7 eventually, it's like they were like working on it, because they've been making cars for 7 with Sport, and I love it. So I'm really excited. Okay, so now we'll move on to my next one in the series. That's going to be Gran Turismo 1. I think Gran Turismo 1 is, because it's the first game in the series, like, you can't just put it at the worst, even though, like, in so many ways it's probably the worst game, but it's because it's the first game. So you can't judge it against against other games in terms of like certain features, but I'll kind of do that a little bit just because you can't completely ignore it. You'll see what I'm saying. So Gran Turismo 1, the main thing that makes me rank GT1 lower is that you don't have a lot of cars. You don't have a lot of British cars. I think you only have TVRs and Aston Martins, and you have only Chevys and Dodges. You don't have Ford yet. You don't have like Jag. You don't have like there's not a lot of cars in GT1. It's mainly a Japanese game, like Japanese cars, even though they're awesome. And I got to love a lot of Japanese cars because of Gran Turismo 1. It's like, yeah, you don't really have a lot of other cars in this game. You have like at least I think it's like not even 20 cars that are from America, from not Japan in that game. So that's like kind of funny. But there's also not a lot of events in Gran Turismo 1. Gran Turismo 1 is one of the few games where you really do have to grind a whole lot. I think 5 you would have too, but I literally got tired of it. In 1, you have to grind that first Sunday Cup a whole bunch and keep selling the Mazda Speed A-Spec over and over and over and over again to be able to actually progress that game. You can't just have a startup car and then like make it through that game, because the jump in difficulty from Sunday Cup to Clubman Cup is so insane that you basically just have to buy a nice car. So you have to just sell a bunch of Mazda Speed A-Spec cars over and over and over again to make that happen. So there's a little bit of that. Like a lot of the later games, I think all the other games except for 5 had it where you could basically just buy one car at the beginning, that you win a bunch of prize cars to finish the rest of the game, and then you get to just social experiment every car that is in the game and see how fast they all go. That's like what most people do. That's what I do, and I think that's what a lot of people do, is they just see how fast every car can go in the game. They buy their favorite cars, they tune them up and max speed them and try to create glitches. Like, that's what most people do in Gran Turismo. So like in Gran Turismo 1, you have to grind earlier in the game. Usually the grind is made for later in the game, but in Gran Turismo 1 it's early. A thing that Gran Turismo 1 did that was so completely sick and awesome, it was the coolest thing ever, is racing modifying cars. Remember when that was a thing? I'll go back to GT5 for a second and give GT5 some credit. They brought back racing modifications in that game. Kind of barely, bare bones, but they at least brought it back. GT1, every single car in the game, I'm pretty sure, was racing modifiable, except for maybe the concept car, but it was only because it had its own LM race car that was separate. But that was so freaking cool that they did that. They literally, you could racing modify every car, and they were based on like real race cars that were around the time, like British touring cars and JGTC as well, and like all these like cool GT300 cars, GT500 cars that have like homages to like the Mazda 77B. Like, that stuff was so cool that they had racing modified cars, and that they even made races with racing modified cars in them. I thought that was such a good idea, and I understand why that's gone, because that would be completely exhausting. Can you imagine having interior views for every car also being racing modified and like the whole interior changing? Like, can you imagine? That would be completely insane. So I'm glad that I get why they got rid of it. It would make the games take like 50,000 years to develop. So, but man, that was awesome in GT1. The racing modified cars were such a cool thing. Music was amazing in GT1 as well. I'm gonna just like randomly mention that here. Gran Turismo 1 had like such good music. It was so iconic, and like I just thought it was amazing. And also the races, yeah, I said this earlier, the races were super unique, where they had like literally UK versus US, UK versus Japan, German, or not German, there were no German cars in this game, in GT1, but like, you have such unique races, the Mega Car Cup, or the Mega Speed Cup, or whatever it is, the one with the GTO that has like 1,000,000 horsepower. That stuff is awesome. Like, they really did a good job of making GT1 replayable. The gameplay of Gran Turismo 1 is fantastic, which is why I actually I think that I would even say that the gameplay of Gran Turismo 1 is better than, I mean, it's not, it's more arcadey. It's probably not more realistic than 6, but it's way more replayable than 6. Like, I feel like I would have way more fun playing Gran Turismo 1 if I didn't have the primitive controls, because the controls were bad, but that's because it was on PlayStation 1. You don't have, the dual analog sticks like didn't work, and so again, I'm not gonna knock Gran Turismo 1 on the controls. I will give 5 and 6 good respect for the controls, because obviously they're like, it's so exact and realistic and stuff like that. But GT1, obviously, it's like you just have to touch the arrows. I don't think there was the dual sticks worked. You probably, if you download it on the PSN, hit play. Sorry. And you play Gran Turismo 1 on the PS3, I bet you could do dual analog sticks. It'd be much more fun. But like, going back and playing them now, it's like, whoa. So that's a big deal. But yeah, I think I would say that Gran Turismo 1 is probably above 5 and 6, but only barely above 6. I mean, again, once you get to 6, all the games are extremely good, and I would recommend every single game in the Gran Turismo series but 5. Because even the ones that are, as we've come to notice, and as I've said on my channel a lot, basically there's like, the way that Polyphony makes their games is there's a game, Gran Turismo, where it's amazing, kind of simple. And then you have Gran Turismo 2, which is just an improvement of GT1 in every way. And there's 3, which is like the jump to PS2. Simple game, graphics are incredible, but there's not a lot of cars and content. Then you have 4, which is just the improvement. They do the same thing with 5 and 6. So like, but with 3 and with 1, there's a reason to buy them. I don't think there's a reason to buy 5. So, all right, now we're going to move on to the next game, which I think is the next best in the series. Now we're on to what, 3? This is the third best one in the game. I would say Gran Turismo 2 is the third best game in the series right now. I think it's because of the fact that it's literally an improved version of GT1 in every single way. It's absolutely incredible in every single way. There are so many cars in GT1. It's insane. In GT2. It is insane how many cars are in GT2. I cannot believe how many cars they threw into GT2. There's like 650 cars, or like 700 or whatever it is. There's so many cars in GT2 on a PlayStation 1. That's crazy. The graphics are better than GT1 as well. They kind of added some polish, some shine. It looks way better. I mean, it's still very similar in the same way that 6 and 5 are similar, but you can tell a difference the same way as with 6 and 5. I think 2 is better than 1 in terms of graphics as well. Again, so many cars are racing modifiable. Not every single car is racing modifiable in GT2, but most of them are. And that is still, I mean, that is incredible that they did that. Like, that blows my mind. That they racing modified, like, 95% of the cars in GT2. Like, wow. And they made that many cars in the game. And they made unique cars in GT2. That's the thing that I was just, like, I think I talked about this a lot on my channel when I'd play through these Gran Turismo games. Gran Turismo 2 had some of the most unique cars ever. They had the Ford GT90 race car. They had the Suzuki Cultus Pikes Peak car. They had the Vector M12. Vector, the whole brand. The W8, the M12, the M12 LM race car. They had Venturi, the Atlantique 300, 400, and 600. Like, what? Those cars were crazy. They had that, like, Rover Mini Cooper. They had that Jaguar XJR15 race car. Just naming them off the top of my head. Those cars were so cool. They had the GT1 road car, which is in this game, obviously, GT3. But they had the Nissan R390 GT1 from 97. The Toyota GT1 race car from 98. They had the Ray Brig from 99. The Takata NSX. They had the Zexel, the Cure. They had the Arta Zexel Skyline from 99. They had the Calsonic 99. They had all these incredible cars that never came back. They had the TVR Chimera, and they had 3 specs for that. They had like a million different Golfs, Alfa Romeos. They all had different specs. It's not bad to me to duplicate a lot of cars if you actually change the performance because you show the different specs. So when you having 5 Volkswagen Golfs, but you have the Volkswagen Golf V6, the Cabriolet was cut. All the different versions of the Volkswagen Golf. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but there's like 5. There's like 5 different Cerebras. There's like a Speed 6. There's a 4.0, 4.5, and 5.0. So you can have a Cerebra race, and it would actually have like 4 different cars in it. So like that stuff is awesome. They did such a good job of like duplicating cars where you think, okay guys, you're just duplicating cars. But they all had different specs. In the later games, when they duplicate cars, they all have the same specs. Like all the different Skyline GTRs, they have like M spec, NER spec, and they all have 276, every single one. But like with the TVRs, they didn't do that. Like they don't do that anymore. They just have the Toyota. They have the TVR Cerebra Speed 6, and every TVR is gone. All the other ones from GT2 were gone. But they had like 5. You know, they had the Jaguar XKR vehicle and the Jaguar XJR 3.2 Sport. You have all these different versions of the same car that had different specs. So you could go, oh, I love that Jag, but I can't afford it. So I'll buy the slower one and tune it up to the faster one, and then I'll feel like decent for now. That'll save me some money. Like you can actually make decisions in GT2. Because there's so many different versions of the same car that actually have like a reason to buy them. There's a million different Alfa Romeos. Again, and the rallies, the racing modifications are all sick because they're all based on real cars. They had much more licensing capabilities, so they actually had some like unique, like they had the Puma GTO. They had like multiple Alfa Romeo DTM race cars, touring cars. Incredible. Gran Turismo 2 was like so underrated, it was insane. And Rally was like massive in GT2. Brought that in, had the Pikes Peak climb and downhill. That course alone is so sick. I'm like, go Gran Turismo 2. I would buy Gran Turismo 2 even with the bad controls. I would buy it on the PS1. So if you think you should do it. I would be fine with you buying Gran Turismo 2. And 1 too, but 2 is just incredible. All right, so next up, and this is the thing that was, I'm sure people will say things on this, but I think the second favorite for me is Gran Turismo 4 by a hair, honestly. Gran Turismo 4 is so good. Music is very good. Gameplay is good. The only things that knock it down is like the fact that they have a 24-hour race where you just kill your PS2, and like the B-Spec mode I still don't think is very good. Like I get why they put it in the game, but I just don't think the B-Spec mode is very useful. You just shouldn't have races that long on a game. You shouldn't torture a human being or a PS2 that way and have 24-hour races on Le Mans. I get it because that's like what they wanted to show, but I'm like, wow, guys, that was kind of insane. But the graphics are better than any like I think are better than GT3, but they're obviously not as good as the PS3 ones. But the Gran Turismo 4 graphics have aged very well. It is a very very timeless game, absolutely insane. Um, Gameplay is pretty easy, not gonna lie, and that's like one of the largest factors I've been putting on all my things. The gameplay is pretty easy for GT4, mainly because the AI are pretty passive. So like once you get in front of them, they probably won't pass you back unless you make a mistake and like go off the course. So that's just kind of like the thing to know about GT4. But GT4, what they lack in gameplay like that, they make up for in literally replayability. There are like a billion zillion ways to play through GT4, not gonna lie. Like the way I'm playing through it right now on my channel is like just one way of like, I mean, it's literally infinite because you can buy so many different used cars at the start of the game, do license tests, you win cars from getting even bronzes in the license test. That is awesome that they even thought of that. That you get multiple prize cards if you get a silver, you get 2 or 3 for gold. So that's so legit and so smart they did that. Also, there's the driving mission, so you don't even have to do a license. You can just do driving missions and win a car that way. There's the special rally events on like George Paris and Chamonix and all that stuff. Like you have so many different ways to play through the game. You can do like the one make races in the dealers. You can do the beginner cup. And then all the different cars in the used car dealership. There's so many ways. It's almost overwhelming. There's so many different ways to play through GT4. It's absolutely incredible. I think that GT4 is very much worth playing. I think anybody should pick that up if you haven't played it. If you've played through it in the past, play through it again. It is so worth it. It's very, very fun. And I do think that B-Spec mode was actually better in 4 than in 5, by the way. Like, 5's was terrible. 4's was just like, meh. 4's was good for getting AI fails. I will give it that. Because you can just do AI fails on arcade mode forever, like I do on my channel. Check that out. I have a playlist on it. But, yeah. I think it's just really, really good. I think 4 has a lot of things going for it. And again, it has just so many cars. I think it has over 1,000 cars, if I'm not mistaken. GT4 has over 1,000. And that is just crazy to think about, that on a PS2. Like, the 700 on PS1 was crazy, but the over 1,000 on PS2 is, like, just as crazy. Like, I'm so impressed with Polyphony for how they do that stuff. And they brought back a lot of cars from GT2. Not all of them, but they brought back a lot, and I'm very proud of them for doing that, because GT2 had some amazing cars, and I could tell that when they switched to 3, they basically went for quality over quantity, and then they brought a lot of them back for 4, and then 5, and then 6. They just kind of slowly have been adding cars back. But Polyphony, bring back the Suzuki Cultus, bring back Vector, and bring back Venturi. Come on, let's do it. But yeah, the driving missions were very fun. Replay theater was good. The camera mode was really cool in GT4. I mean, I'm not into that kind of thing, but I get how important that is. I think it's really incredible that they had a photo mode, and it was beautiful, and that you could, like, spin around the car. They basically were, like, flaunting. I mean, a photo mode in a racing game is just to flaunt how good you made your graphics. And they made their graphics so good that they were like, let's do it. Let's put a photo mode in the game. Why don't we just give this to the player? Like, let's do it. They did it, and everyone loves it. So, like, I think that shows a lot of how good Polyphony is. Polyphony's always been good about graphics, and 4 kind of is, like, the pinnacle of, like, using small hardware to make something amazing happen. I just am so amazed with GT4's graphics, and 3's to this day, but specifically 4's, it's very, very impressive. Alright, so now that by process of elimination you've figured out that the first game, my favorite game, the game that's also in the video in the background, is Gran Turismo 3. I absolutely love Gran Turismo 3. It's the game that I think I fell more in love with. I got all of them. I played through them all at the time of them coming out, but GT3 was probably the game that, like, impacted me the most. The gameplay is, I would say, literally perfect. The AI, the way they drive is perfect. They make mistakes, but they also do well. They're aggressive, but they don't just destroy you. And then they like, because in GT2 they'll just push you out of the way. GT3 they kind of do that, but it's not nearly as dramatic. I think that GT3 has the replayability of lots of different races. As you can tell, I've made a lot of things on my channel about GT3. I think the way they made the game was fascinating in that they basically created mini rivalries between certain types of cars and then basically formed their content and the gameplay off of that. So like you have a race with JGTC, so they have like about 6 JGTC cars in the game. So then you have a race with the GT All Stars, and there's like 8 or so cars there, and then you have like the rally car race where you like race against the Ford Escort and the Ford Focus rally car and the Celica and like all those like GT 300 cars. They basically would just create rivalries between certain versions of cars, and then that was how they like decided to make their races, and I think it went really well, honestly, and that was what made it really fun. They added Paganis in GT3. Pagani is an amazing brand. Added the 787B in GT3, which I'm glad they did. It's basically a staple to every Gran Turismo game now. Castroton Supra 2000 made its debut on that one as well, so that's another incredible car. I think GT3 just takes the cake in terms of, and also the music is amazing in GT3. I can never use it because it's licensed, but go listen to it. It's really great. The North American version has Snoop Dogg. It's amazing. It's just a lot of fun to play through GT3. Gameplay is probably the most important thing to me, but graphics are also incredible for GT3. It's a 2001 game and it looks so good with heat coming off the road, and the camera when the replay camera is moving around looking at the car, it kind of shakes like it's somebody standing on the side of the road. That stuff is just like so subtle and so good. I'm blown away. I'm blown away by how good GT3 looks, 20 years later as of the time of me recording this. More like 21 years, yeah. So I just think that it's so good. It's a very timeless game, and if I had to suggest a game to play first in the series, I would say play GT3 and then play the other ones next. But that's just my opinion. I think GT3 is the best game. They do a good job. It has a great difficulty curve. It starts very easy. Again, there's a lot of different ways to replay this game. You go the license route, you get a Mazda MX-5 Miata, you do the endurance race with the Miatas. You can win a Formula 1 car that way. You can do so many different ways to start these games. And I think that's just something that's really cool, that even with so few cars, which is the one downside to GT3, there's a lot of different ways to replay this game. And it's like got a lot of content, but not so much that like you could totally like replay this game a lot and not feel like you're wasting your time. It's just the right amount of length that it doesn't take forever ever, but it takes a while to beat it. It's just perfect in terms of length, and the difficulty does extend all the way to basically super challenging, almost impossible with the Formula 1 race. Formula 1 cars are new in this game as well, and there's a rally license in this game, which is I don't think there's ever been a rally license apart from Gran Turismo 3, so they did that. Polyphony just nailed it with Gran Turismo 3, and I think that's like pretty much all I want to say on 3. It's just perfect. I mean, what else is there to say? It's literally the best. It's so good. It has the gameplay loop basically perfect. It's a little bit arcadey, but not too much. Not as arcadey as GT 1 and 2, but the games get a little stiff later, so it's like perfectly in that sweet spot. So now what I wanted to talk about at the end here as the video is wrapping up is where do I think GT7 will sit? Where will it lie on the field of games? I definitely think that GT7 has the ability to be the best game in the series. What really matters, and I'm sure they've been working on it, the gameplay is essential. GT7 is going to have the car count because they're going to port them over from Sport. So they're going to have the cars. They're going to have a lot more cars than they would have if they had just started 7 from scratch. They're going to have a lot of good circuits for the same reason. Sport, again, as I've said before, Sport set up 7 to become potentially the best game in the series. Because there's going to be a lot of cars at launch. I'm sure they'll add more, but there's amazing courses, and I'm sure they'll add more of those as well. The key is the gameplay. I want to see if the AI make mistakes, like enough to be like noticeable, then I think that 7 has the ability to be the best, because that is something that people look for. They look for AI that kind of are realistic and human. GT4 through 6, the AI were basically perfect. Like in 6, every once in a while, certain cars would spin out, but not really, honestly. It wasn't very common. And so I think 7 has the potential to be the best game. It has all the equipment to be there. It's got the cars, it's got the tracks. It could have music is very important too. Throw a couple remixes of classic songs in the game, and that'll just get everyone's nostalgia going. They did the great job with the trailer. The game comes out very soon too, by the way, as of the recording of this. So it's the AI that's the key. If the AI make mistakes, spin out in front of the player, stuff like that. If they are aggressive and they don't just drive a ghost path, but they also make mistakes, then it'll be the perfect game and it'll be the best. If the AI are not great, then I would put it below maybe a second, 2, 3, or maybe 4. It would be like in the 2 to 3 area if the AI is like perfect, like 4, because it would just be a prettier game than 4. So that's what I have to say about that. Hopefully y'all agree. Let me know in the comments below what y'all think. Thank y'all for watching. Hope y'all have a great day.